From crazy relegation escapes to the biggest heartbreaks, another year of Brazilian football has come to an end, and boy was it exciting as ever. I mean, we really had all sorts of situations happen. And as most people know, the European leagues and the South American leagues have different starts, which means that Europe is just starting up, but the Brazilian league is coming to an end. And without wasting any more time, let's go over the league table and talk about the surprises of the season and what happened in the Libertadores and Sudamericana, which is the continental competitions of South America. Starting off from the bottom of the table, let's talk about the teams who got relegated. And the first one is a shock to me, as Cuiabá find themselves with just 30 points heading to the second division. And for a club who uses their budget so wisely, Cuiabá was able to stay afloat in the division. Never challenging for the upper mid-table spots, but they were always good enough to stay in the league. I think they will bounce back right away from the second division because they have been working really well with the transfers, and they have stayed 4 seasons in the top flight, which should give them the finances to get back up there. Sad to see them go, but they'll be back before we know it. And then going to 19th with Atlético Goianiense. This club had just promoted to the first division last season, and honestly they were kind of expected to go down, as they really aren't a staple in the league, and are kind of a yo-yo club that bounces between the first and second division. There's not really much more I could say on that. I don't mean to disrespect them, but their biggest achievement is winning the second division in 2016. So I guess this was kind of expected. In 18th place saw another newly promoted club go straight back to the second division with Kursat. I mean, this was their first season in the top flight for the first time since 2014, so once again, this isn't that big of a shock, as they did finish 3rd in the Serie B to get here, so they weren't exactly looking like the strongest club. Like I said, this year the league is very competitive, so it was going to be a tough task for them to stay in the division. And finally, to our last relegation spot, this one is a surprise, as Atlético Paranaense find themselves relegated. And honestly, they have no one to blame but themselves, as in their last 4 games, they would lose twice and draw twice, falling from 2 points away from safety. And this is terrible. I mean, they were the ones who sold Vitor Roque to Barcelona for 30 million euros, and to be honest, their squad isn't bad at all. And I have to ask, why didn't they reinforce the squad in the transfer market with that huge sum of money they got from Vitor? Anyways, this relegation means that they're going to lose a lot of their young talent for lower prices, as according to Transfer Market, 7 out of their 10 most valuable players are below 26 years of age. Look, they will definitely come back to the first division as they have been playing in the Serie A for years, but this was a big letdown by the side. Now let's talk about places 15th and 16th. And these guys are weird because they didn't get relegated, but they didn't finish 14th, so they don't get to qualify for the Sudamericana. So it's just a meh season. And first starting off with Red Bull Bragantino, and man, they survived by the skin of their teeth, beating Criciúma on the final match day in a strong 5-1 display. With their budget, Red Bull shouldn't really be fighting relegation, but I'm sure the executives of the energy drink company are happy that their walking billboard club isn't in the second division, which would have hurt the brand. So I guess it's a success. And now to 15th spot Juventude, who were another club who are newly promoted, and honestly, I'm sure the fan base is happy with staying in the division, as survival was the main focus of the year, and that's what happened. Can't really ask for more. I mean, they were a point or 2 away from getting to the Sudamericana, but like I said, I don't think they'll be complaining too much. Good luck to them, as they will most likely be in another relegation battle come next year. And now we go to 14th for our first Sudamericana spot. And before anyone asks how the heck does 14th place in a league qualify for a continental tournament, well, Brazil is the strongest league in South America, and the only one who comes remotely close to them is Argentina and maybe Uruguay. So the Brazilians get 12 spots, and also winning the Brazilian Cup gets you a Libertadores spot. And usually as well, for the past 6 years, the Libertadores winner has been a club from Brazil, meaning that basically the whole Brazilian league qualifies for the Sudamericana or Libertadores, which is the Europa League equivalent and Champions League equivalent. Now that we got that out of the way, Grêmio find themselves finishing 14th, and man, what a fall from grace. Last season, Grêmio was 2nd place, just 2 points away from the league title, and I'm sure losing one of the best strikers in our generation in Luis Suarez didn't help at all. And combine that with the fact that the area Grêmio play in was going through a really bad flood in the early part of the season, and this is probably the reason why they find themselves here. I mean, it could be worse. At one point, relegation was on the minds of some people, but luckily they were unable to stay, and honestly, it's good for them, because the city needed this. Good luck to them next season. Now, in an even weirder turn of events, Fluminese finished 13th, and what a rollercoaster ride it has been for them. As they were the winners of the Libertadores last year, this season saw them going through an injury crisis, with key figures like John Arias and Thiago Silva struggling to get on the pitch. But they went undefeated in their last 5 matches and even beat second place Palmeiras 1-0 in their final game, which prompted Thiago Silva to walk the full length of the pitch on his knees after the match. And good for them to turn it up in the last few games. And hey, they even qualified for the Sudamericana, so who knows what could happen next season now that everyone is healthy. And going up to 12th place has to be the heartbreak of the season, as Atlético Mineiro would start the season off perfectly, winning their state cup against their biggest rivals Cruzeiro. However, the ending of the season would be a nightmare. Counting the exception of their very last league match, they would go 12 games without a win, and their first heartbreak would come in the Brazilian Cup. Facing off against Flamengo in a 2-legged final, they would lose both matches with a score of 4-1 on the aggregate, and the pain did not end there, as they would also make it to the Libertadores final, this time facing Botafogo, who are known to be the bottlers to some. And even though Botafogo would get a red card in the literal first minute of the game, they lost 3-1 to 10 men. It's honestly got to hurt like crazy to Mineiro fan, because they were so close of having their best season of all time with a double in 2 cup competitions. But football has to have some losers, and this season it was them. But I'm sure they will come back with a fiery vengeance. Finishing right above them in 11th is Vitória, and this is the last of the newly promoted teams. And man, Vitória can't complain, as they were never in a relegation race and were floating in those mid-table Sudamericana spots. They have a pretty good team, and I'm excited to see how they will do now that they have to balance Sudamericana football with the league. I think that may come back to bite them with all the fixture congestion, but for now, I'm sure they have no complaints. Finally cracking the top 10 spots, in 10th place, Vasco da Gama missed out in Sudamericana football last season. And I'm positive that only helped them, as they only had the league to focus on. And there has been a clear improvement in their game. So honestly, I think this jump from 15th to 10th is a step in the right direction. And once again, they kind of just met the expectation of what they needed to do. I don't have too much to say on them. Now getting to another interesting story, Cruzeiro are 9th place, just barely missing out on the Libertadores qualifiers, and I'm sure that's not the only pain they are feeling. As Cruzeiro were in the top 4 to 8 range most of the season, they kind of seem to be more focused on the Sudamericana, and it almost paid off, as they reached the final of the competition and faced off against Argentinian giants Racing Club. And it was a very shaky defensive effort from Cruzeiro, as Racing would have a goal called off in the early moments, but in the 15th and 20th minute, Racing would still score to find themselves 2-0 up. And although Cruzeiro did get one back in the second half to make it more interesting, a 95th minute dagger from Roger Martinez saw Racing Club win their first ever Sudamericana. It's a tough season for them, as they also lost the state club to their biggest rivals in Mineiro as well. But things are looking up under the new ownership, and it looks like they are going to be very active in the transfer market this upcoming season, so they are an interesting team to keep an eye on. And coming to the Libertadores spots, 8th place Bahia are actually owned by the City Footballing Group, and I'm sure qualifying for the Libertadores has made the fan base really excited. I mean, they do have an excellent scouting network, and it was only a matter of time before a team owned by the City Group would see success. Honestly, not much more to say on Bahia. Good luck to them next season. But now, another shock. In 7th place is where Corinthians find themselves, and honestly, they should be over the moon, as for like 25 games, Corinthians were battling relegation. And somehow during this whole relegation race, they still reached the semis of both the Brazilian Cup and Sudamericana. But that's when Memphis Depay joined, and at first he did have a lot of problems with his fitness, but the moment he adjusted, wow. Their last 10 league matches saw them undefeated, winning 9 out of those 10, and Memphis would pop off, as just in 11 matches for the side, he would score 7 and assist 1. That guy is cold, and Corinthians with him leading the attack is surely going to be one of the better teams in the league. And after a disappointing season where they finished 13th last year, jumping 6 spots higher was certainly not expected. And now in 6th comes Sao Paulo, and their season kinda went as expected, As they won the Brazilian Super Cup against Palmeiras to start the year, they became the only Brazilian club to win every single trophy a Brazilian team can win. They made history, and sure, it has been a while since they won the league title, but just like Corinthians, they can't complain, as last year they would finish 11th, so now fighting for the top 4 is definitely a step in the right direction. And these two historic clubs will most definitely be fighting for more silverware very soon. 5th place saw Grêmio's eternal rivals Internacional have a weird season. As they would also be severely impacted by the floods, Internacional would be mid-table for basically half the season, until they just turned up out of nowhere, going on a 16-game undefeated streak in the league, winning 12 of those games. And that put them way higher in the table than expected, and they were able to get back into the Libertadores. Honestly, I'm pretty surprised at Ener Valencia is not going to be a reliable goal scorer at just age 35. He only scored 3 goals in 24 matches. This guy was literally the Turkish league's top scorer with Fenerbahce just 2 seasons ago. But hey, I guess everyone's career has to fall off one day. I'm sure they will be on a lookout for a new striker come this next transfer window. And now getting to the 4th place Fortaleza, and honestly congratulations to them, as year on year they look to be improving. Being 4th place with a much lower budget than some of these teams below them, you have to give credit where credit is due. These guys are really stamping themselves as one of the better teams in Brazilian football. Always in the top half of the table, and even getting to the final of the Sudamericana a couple years back. Unfortunately, they did lose that match, but it's been another good season from them. And finally, to the top 3, and man, Flamengo always find a way to get their hands on a trophy. As one of the league's most dominant sides, they won the Brazilian Cup and consistently stayed near those top positions, but I won't overlook their terrible exit in the Libertadores to major underdogs Peñarol in the quarterfinals. And I know Peñarol has won the competition 5 times, but this is a new era, and with the major differences in finances and players, Flamengo should have won. But hey, they still got their hands on a trophy, so everything is just fine. There's no need to be in panic mode. In talking about panic mode, 2nd place Palmeiras might start to feel a little sweat running down their face, as they lost in the Super Cup match to start the season, but it wasn't only that, as they were chasing a three-peat in the Brasileiro. Botafogo would be the ones to ruin their party. And I mean seriously, it all started in the Libertadores, where these two would face off in the round of 16. And it was such a thriller, as in the second leg, Botafogo would find themselves 2-0 up, but Palmeiras would almost snatch away the tie, as they would score in the 86th and 90th minute, and even had a goal disallowed. As Botafogo would barely hold on from the lead from the first match, but it didn't end there. As in their final 3 games of the season, Palmeiras had been chasing Botafogo the whole time. But they got beat pretty easily in a 3-1 loss against Botafogo, and in their final match, they would go on to lose to Fluminese and were unable to pick up any silverware. And what's even worse for them is their 17-year-old star boy, William Estevao, who would score 13 goals and have 9 assists in just 31 appearances, is set to leave the club to join Chelsea come next season. But they did get an enormous fee for him, which could be worth up to 50 million with bonuses, so I'm sure they'll be making some moves to replace him. Now, finally, what we've all been waiting for. The champions of the 2024 Brasileiro is Botafogo, and man, what more can anyone ask for? As not only did they beat Palmeiras to the title, but also Mineiro in the Libertadores final, even with 10 men, and they become the 3rd team to win both the league and the Libertadores in the same year, joining Santos and Flamengo. And this is just so deserved after last season's choke, which saw them have a 13-point lead in the league before giving it up to Palmeiras. And man, these fans owe John Textor everything, as that man financially helped the club and brought them from the 2nd division, as Botafogo were playing there just 4 years ago. They finished dead last in the league in the 2020-2021 season, and they would now go on to beat Palmeiras' biggest rivals on the final match day, Sao Paulo. And there was actually a lot of controversy before this game, because the manager of Palmeiras would be in an interview where he alluded his rivals in Sao Paulo would throw the match. And you might be asking, well, why would Sao Paulo do that? Well, see, Sao Paulo is the only club in Brazil to have won the league title 3 times straight. And with Palmeiras being back-to-back champions, I doubt they wanted their intercity rivals to say that they were also 3-peat champions. And honestly, Sao Paulo didn't even play bad. even bringing the game level at one point. And Botafogo just needed a draw, but they still earned the win and shed those claims of being a bottle club, and man, were the fans going insane during the celebrations. And also, Botafogo has earned the last spot in the Club World Cup that will happen next year. And quickly heading over to the second division, Santos finished first in the league, so they will be returning to the Serie A. And there has been so many headlines about Neymar making a possible return to the club, which would be so awesome. But with another Brazilian season done and in the books, which club surprised you the most? And was this year the most exciting Brasileiro season in a while? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.